Hello, and in this training video, we will walk through crediting a patient's copay. When a patient overpays on their copay amount, there are two different ways to handle this. The first way would be to remove the incorrect transfer amount from the patient's invoice. The second way would be to do a negative transfer from the insurance payment screen. The first way of removing the incorrect copay amount is usually the most common, and it can be a little bit easier when you're doing one patient. If you have a few different patients that overpaid their copay amount for the same insurance payment, let's say Blue Cross Blue Shield, someone was over collecting for a few patients. The second way of doing a negative transfer would be a little bit easier as you can do a group of them at once. We're going to go over the first method of removing the incorrect copay amount. You will start within the patient's account pod. The first step will be you will need to find the patient's paid invoice where they paid the original incorrect amount. To do this, you can change your status drop down here from active to paid. You can click the search button, or if this patient has a number of insurance balances, you can also change your payer type to patient and then click your search button. Depending on how long you've been live and how much information, this may be a long list. You can also use a service date to narrow this down. I know the patient overpaid their copay amount here from this date of service. Now I'm going to single click the invoice number to open up the invoice. With the invoice open, the first step is to change the invoice from paid to active and select your check mark. And now you'll need to change your invoice to pending so that you can make changes. Now you'll want to single click on the line item that has the incorrect copay amount. If you are not sure which line item has the incorrect amount, you can hover your cursor over the adjustment column to see the reasons. Here I can see we had that transfer in of the $75. That is my incorrect copay amount. I'm going to single click the line item. To remove this transfer in of the $75, I'm going to single click the remove checkbox and select save in the lower right. This will remove the copay adjustment from the patient's invoice and send it back to the insurance invoice. If the patient does not owe any other copay amounts, you are done. You can change the invoice back to authorized and either leave the credit here or refund it depending on your office policy. If the patient owes a different copay amount, in this example, she paid the $75 copay, but she only owes a $30 copay, we will have a few more steps. We will need to close this invoice and open up the insurance invoice. I'm going to go ahead and clear these settings back to active and all payer types and click search. Now I'm going to open up the insurance invoice. Because we removed that copay transfer back here, we have to redo the transfer. You can select the Transfer Items button, select your reason. Again, we're going to select the coinsurance copay. And you want to make sure that your transfer to says patient and the existing invoice. If you do not have the existing invoice, this is because you changed it back to authorized. Please close this, close the invoice, go back to the patient invoice, and change it to pending. Now that we have the correct existing invoice, we're going to put the transfer amount. In this case, they should have paid a $30 copay, so we will transfer $30 back to the patient invoice and select Save in the lower right. I'm going to go ahead and close the insurance invoice and take a look at the patient invoice again. I'm going to single click the patient's invoice number. And here we can see the difference of the $75 and the $35 is a $45 credit. This is the credit amount that we can provide to the patient. Now that we are done with this invoice, we can authorize it and we can refund the patient. I'm going to select my 3 dots and grant credit. Within the grant credit screen, you have a few different options. If you are refunding your patient today and you do not need to change the date of the refund, you can select refund, put the amount, select any methods, locations, and save. If you do need to change the date of the refund, please select the credit option first and credit the patient first. Now let's take a look at the second way to handle crediting a patient copay, doing the negative transfer. When it comes to this method, you can change the original patient invoice or you can transfer the credit overpayment to a new invoice. I am only going to show working on the patient's original invoice. This does have a few more steps, but it makes the patient's invoice cleaner and easier to read. You are going to start within the patient's account pod, and you will need to find that patient's invoice. Again, I'm going to change my status to paid. I'm going to select a payer type and click search. I know that this is the correct invoice by the date of service. I'm going to single click the invoice number and change the status. We're going to change it from paid to active and select the check mark. And I'm going to change this invoice to pending. Changing the invoice to pending is an important step as this will allow you to do the negative transfer to the same invoice. Like last time, our patient has overpaid. We collected a $75 copayment, and it should have only been a $30 copayment. We're going to close this invoice, and we're going to head into our insurance payment. I have already started my insurance payment for this patient. With the insurance payment open, I'm going to head on into the items hyperlink towards the right side of the screen. And this opens our payment items screen. In the top, you want to select your transfer reason. These reasons are customizable to your office, so you may select a different option than what I'm going to choose. In this case, I'm going to select coinsurance copay. And again, we want to make sure the transfer to has patient and that we see the existing invoice. This will allow us to do the negative transfer to the same invoice. Once you have those selected, you're going to click the green Add Transfer Write-Off button, and you will see an additional column. Here, transfer number 1 is the transfer for that coinsurance copay to the existing patient invoice. Now you will single click the pencil icon to the right of the line item that has the incorrect copay. If you are not sure, just like the other screen, you can hover to see the reasons. I'm going to go ahead and single click for this item. I'm going to put in a negative amount for the difference or the credit amount that I'm going to be providing the patient. The difference of the $75 that we collected and the $30 that the patient truly owed is $45. I'm going to select negative $45. That'll bring up the balance for this line item, and I'm going to go forward with the rest of my payment processing. I went ahead and added in my additional payment and write-offs, so I'm going to select Save in the lower right. I have already posted the other entries needed for this payment, so now that I am done with my payment, I'm going to select Apply Payments in the lower right. Let's go take a look at the patient's account pod to see what that invoice looks like. Now that the patient has a credit amount, we can see it on the invoice. Again, single click the invoice number to open up your invoice. Now that I am done correcting the patient's copay, I can select my Authorized button and the 3 dots to select Grant Credit. I am going to select Refund Patient as the refund has been processed today. I'm going to put the amount of the $45, my method, and select Save in the lower right. Now we have our patient's invoice zeroed out. We have the correct copay amount listed. We have the refund and the credit. You can print this invoice and hand it directly to your patient. This concludes our video on crediting a patient. Thank you.